The Tennessee Titans need to fix the middle of their defense, and they can do it in the NFL draft. I'll tell you how on today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. Join your friends and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. We are continuing the 2024 Locked On Titans NFL Draft Preview Series. We have gone through the offense. We looked at edge rushers. Now it's time to look at the middle of the front seven, the defensive line, and most importantly, the linebackers. I'm going to go over the top options, the mid-round options, the late-round options, and who fits best for the Titans at those positions. Before I dive into it, thank you for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. Make sure you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Titans podcast. Shout out to my everydayers out there tuning in Monday through Friday. If you aren't an everydayer, you need to be one. Tomorrow, we are going to look at the secondary, cornerbacks and safeties, and the Titans can maybe use one of each in the draft. So I'll dive into those tomorrow, but today, let's start with the linebackers. Before I dive in, throw a thumbs up on the video if you're watching on YouTube. And with that being said, let's get it. Number one, the top linebacker in the draft, in my opinion, is Peyton Wilson. Peyton Wilson out of NC State. He has great size. He's 6'4". He is 230 pounds. 6'3", 230. He is 24 years old, though, so an older prospect. He's got great speed. He's a very sure tackler, good in coverage, has good awareness as well, plays with great hands to keep defensive linemen off his body, and he's a versatile guy. Again, he can drop back in coverage. He can pass rush as well. He's been used all over the defense. Now, the concern with Peyton Wilson is the injuries. The guy has had double-digit surgeries. He's hurt all the time. And when you're 24 years old and you've had that many surgeries, that's going to be something that's of major concern to teams. There's just no way around it. Now, shedding blocks is something that he could struggle with a little bit when bigger, stronger offensive linemen get on his body. But overall, I think if you just looked at Peyton Wilson in a vacuum, he's the best linebacker in the draft. Now, would the Titans take him at number 38? I wouldn't. I wouldn't want to take a linebacker this high. And I know this is a controversial opinion. And before I go to our next guy, I just want to stop for a second and say this. To me, linebacker is like running back on defense. You can get good production late in the draft. You don't need to spend a bunch of money. Look, the Titans had David Long. They replaced him with Azeez Al-Shaair. We're talking about $5 million linebackers here. Replacement level linebackers. Rand Carthon has had success when he was in San Francisco with drafting linebackers late in the draft that turned into superstars. So to me, linebacker isn't a position where you have to draft it early on. I just don't think it's necessary. It's like running back. Look to the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round, and you're still going to find guys who can come in and contribute. For me, if you have a great defensive line that protects the linebackers, you'll get the most out of your linebackers. If you have a great secondary that can cover, they're going to help your linebackers cover. So to me, out of all of the positions on the defense, nose tackle and interior linebacker, inside linebacker, are the least valuable and the least important. I'm not saying don't take good players, but again, Peyton Willis is probably going to go in round 2, and I don't think the Titans need to spend their second-round pick on a non-premium position like inside linebacker. The next guy is Edgerrin Cooper, and I think Cooper is a better fit for the Tennessee Titans than Peyton Wilson. He's 6'2", 230, 22 and a half years old. He has great length. He has great range to go sideline to sideline and track guys down. Plays with great hands as well. But here's the real point. He is a great blitzing linebacker. Edgerrin Cooper had 10 sacks Okay, he is a great blitzing linebacker. He can run the seam. He has good recognition. He may be thin. All right, he's a thin built guy. He's 230. That's a good weight, but just looking at the way his body is built, he is thin. He's not very good in man coverage right now. He does miss tackles. He's got good speed, but his change of direction could maybe be better. This is a guy who needs to go downhill. And you think about a guy like Kenneth Murray, who the Titans just signed. Edgerrin Cooper is a guy who I think could replace Kenneth Murray right away. And then when Kenneth Murray is gone after the year, Edgerrin Cooper would immediately be in that role. So I think Cooper fits a lot better for Wilson. But again, I think Edgerrin Cooper goes in the second round, and I don't think that I'm willing to take him that high. Another guy who makes a lot of sense for the Titans is Junior Colson out of Michigan. 6'2", 238. The youngest guy we've talked about so far. He's just a little over 21 years old. Really consistent, really reliable tackler, has great vision, plays with great power, and has tremendous experience coming from a Michigan defense that was a pro defense. At the end of the day, it operated as a NFL pro-level defense, and he was the captain of that defense, the leader of that defense. So Junior Colson is a good player, and I think that he's a guy who, now we're talking about maybe third-round options. If the Titans get a trade back, get a third-round pick in the process, Colson could be a guy who makes sense there. Now we're getting on the borderline of, okay, I think it would be a smart decision. If we're picking up a third-round pick and we're picking up Junior Colson, I could absolutely see that. But a guy I think makes even more sense for the Titans that would be available a little bit later is Cedric Gray from North Carolina. 6'1", 234 pounds, 21 years old. He has great speed, so better speed than Colson. And for me, if I'm picking linebackers in the third or fourth round, they better be athletes, okay? And Cedric Gray has great speed. He's great in coverage. With that speed, he's able to recover even if he takes some false steps. He has the speed and instincts to cover tight ends. Instincts are a big thing that pop out with Cedric Gray. He just understands what offenses are trying to do. So I really like Cedric Gray as an option for the Titans in the fourth round. I think he could be there. Now, here's the issue, though. He is not a strong side linebacker. He's not your take-on linebacker. Usually when you have two inside linebackers, one of them is going to be the more physical guy who goes forward, goes straight ahead, and takes on the blocker. If the block is coming his way, the run is coming his way, he's going to take on the puller in the hole. He's going to take on the climbing lineman coming up to the second level. Your hammerhead linebacker, your take-on linebacker is usually your strong side linebacker. Cedric Gray is more of a weak side linebacker where you want your strong side linebacker head on, taking on the block, and then your weak side linebacker can use his speed to come and clean up the running back and get to the guy and take him down. That is how I philosophically see two inside linebackers. Your hammerhead take-on linebacker is your strong side guy, and your quicker, faster, weak side guy who's your sideline-to-sideline rangy guy. So one guy takes on the block, stops in his tracks. The next linebacker comes with the speed and wraps up the ball carrier. Cedric Gray would be a weak side linebacker for the Titans, but I think he could do very, very well with a hammerhead like Kenneth Murray, who's going downhill all the time to attack the line of scrimmage. I think that would be a good pairing for the Titans. The next guy I got to mention, Trevin Wallace. Maybe my favorite linebacker prospect in the draft, okay? Trevin Wallace, if you do mock draft simulate, like I've been taking Trevin Wallace in the 7th round of all of my mock drafts. I think in reality, he is not going to be available anywhere close to the 7th round. I think Trevin Wallace is probably a 4th round pick, maybe 5th round at the latest, but 6'1", 237, only 21 years old, just barely 21 years old as well. He has great size. He has great length with super long, rangy arms. He has incredible speed. He is one of the best athletes at the position in the entire draft. That speed allows him to have sideline to sideline range. He plays with great balance, and he has great hit power. He brings the wood, okay? But it's the mental aspects of the game where Trevin Wallace really needs to develop. His recognition skills, his awareness and coverage, his ability to play man coverage. He is just over-aggressive and overruns plays and gets cheated by play action fakes and misdirection in the backfield. So he needs some good coaching to work on the mental parts of the game, all right? I'm not saying that, he's a dumb player. He doesn't make dumb mistakes. He's just a guy who needs to work on that processing, that awareness, that recognition. You know what I mean? So if he can improve those to pair with his raw physical abilities, you could have a stud in Trevin Wallace. So that's why he's my favorite linebacker prospect. And out of all of my top guys here that I just went over, Trevin Wallace in the 4th or 5th round would be a great move, in my opinion, for the Titans. But with that being said, there are other linebackers in this draft class the Titans could have later on who I think still make a ton of sense. I'll tell you who they are now. Before I do, though, I want to remind you guys that today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Look, I have a competitive side, no doubt about it. And my competitive side loves Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on classic Monopoly where you play not one, but hundreds of different Monopoly boards. And you get crazy locations. You can build up amazing cities that bring you big money. The best part is you get to mess with your friends. It's the best part by far. I can charge them rent on my iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly, but now you can also rob their vaults, a heist, and keep all the riches for yourself. And you got leaderboards that show you who is the biggest Monopoly tycoon. I love it. So not just my competitive side that loves it, but you could team up with your friends as well and people all around the world in timed tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store and on Google Play. All right, Titans fans, let's continue today's breakdown of the linebacker and interior defensive line classes in the NFL draft. We just talked about the top linebackers in the draft and who I think are the best fit stylistically, but now I want to go a little bit deeper into this linebacker class. And I'm going to get to the interior defensive linemen at the end of the show, just pure D linemen, nose tackles, all of that. But linebacker, I would say, is one of the top 5 needs for the Titans, and I really do think they're going to take one. And since my philosophy is the Titans should be looking for linebacker later in the draft, I got to make sure I go over some of these guys who are available later in the draft, because that's probably who the Titans end up with. And the first guy that I'm going to talk about is one of my favorite fits in the entire draft for the Titans, and he'll likely be there late on day 3. Before I dive into that, though, I want to remind you guys, on Wednesday night, the Locked On NFL mock draft came out. 7 p.m. Eastern on Locked On Sports Today, the 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube and on Amazon Fire TV. I'm going to have a special lead up to when that drops at 7 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday night. If you're listening to this on Thursday morning, you can go back and check it out. Each of the Locked On hosts makes the pick for their team. So I am making the pick in a real live mock draft with trades and everything for the Tennessee Titans. It's my favorite thing that we do here at Locked On, so I know I'm spending some time on it, but I really want you guys to check it out. Locked On Sports Today. Go to it and see the Locked On NFL mock draft Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern. But the guy that I was talking about is Jordan Magee. All right, Jordan Magee out of Temple, 6'1", 228 pounds. He's 23 years old, elite speed for the position. He's a guy who's covered slot wide receivers. He's played free safety and been back deep at times. He's got elite speed. Great length as well. Coverage ability with, obviously, naming that experience. He's got great coverage ability for a linebacker. The problem is he's built like a defensive back. So he's thin. He's lean. He doesn't tackle incredibly well. He misses some tackles, because he's basically a former defensive back playing linebacker now. So he needs to put on some weight. And at 23 years old, can he do that? He doesn't really have the recognition skills and the awareness skills of a linebacker. Of course, he's somebody who hasn't been playing that position his entire life. But I think that if you take a guy like that with that speed and athleticism, and you put him in the right role, again, like a weak side linebacker role or a sub-package linebacker role at first, and you have him put on some weight and develop some strength, I think you might have yourself an absolute stud in Jordan Magee. So that's a guy who I really, really like, who could be available in the 6th, 7th round for the Tennessee Titans. Another guy I know a lot of people like a lot that I'm not quite as high on is Jeremiah Trotter Jr. I know you got the name recognition. He played at Clemson, but he's 6 foot, 228 pounds. That's small, man. That's like the smallest guy that we've talked about so far height-wise. He's thin. And for a guy that small and that thin, he just doesn't have great speed. He doesn't shed blocks very well. He's not consistent in zone coverage. So if you're telling me that you're that small, you don't have speed, and you're not good in coverage, how am I supposed to use you? Now, look, he makes very quick reads. The NFL bloodlines of his father are there. He diagnoses plays. He recognizes formations. He really has a good mental understanding. Now, also, you could make the argument he's a guy who had a ton of sacks at linebacker, 14 sacks at linebacker during his time in college. So maybe with the Titans' blitzing system and what they want to do with their linebackers, maybe that does make sense. Okay? And while he's not great in coverage, again, that recognition ability does show up. He does understand route concepts. He just doesn't necessarily have the athleticism to keep up with it. Now, if you're betting on NFL bloodlines here and you think he's just going to find a way to work it out because he's just built that way and born that way, then I understand. Look, I'm not totally against it, but he's just not one of my favorite fits for the Titans in the draft. The next guy that I want to mention is Edofuwan Yolofosio. Edofuwan Yolofosio. I think I said that right. I think I hit it first time. All right. But out of Washington, another guy, 6 foot tall, but he's 236 pounds and 24 years old. That is an older prospect, my friend. So many old prospects in this draft. But with Yolofosio, he's got elite speed for the position, elite speed and great length as well, with super long arms. And he plays with power, and he has incredible instincts to sniff out what the offense is about to do. The change of direction, though, the recognition skills, man coverage. Like, when I talk about recognition, he has great instincts, but recognizing patterns in zone coverage, like what receivers are doing, tight ends across the field. Sometimes he's a little slow on his recognition of route concepts, all right? But overall, with the elite speed, the length, the power, he could be someone who makes sense. But again, not one of my top fits for the Titans. I like Jordan Magee, who I talked about before, but another guy who I like, who I think is a good fit, is Curtis Jacobs out of Penn State. 6'1", 240 pounds. He's the heaviest guy we've talked about so far, and he just turned 22 years old. Being the heaviest guy that we've talked about so far, he has great speed. That size, that speed is a great combination. He's great in pursuit. With that speed, he's able to run quarterbacks down who are scrambling, run running backs down sideline to sideline, and he is a great blitzer. So that's why I think he is a great fit for the Tennessee Titans. And he's another guy, look, he struggles with his reads. He's over-aggressive, getting downhill too quick. He doesn't necessarily have the strength that you would expect from a guy who's 240 pounds. But I think the strength and the reads can be improved upon. Tackling has also been an issue. He's missed some tackles. But if you improve that strength and you improve the reads, you start missing tackles when you feel you're behind in the play and you're going too fast and things are moving too quick for you. When things slow down and you understand things better, you have additional strength mentally and physically, it'll help you be a better tackler. So I think the blitzing ability, the speed, and the size of Curtis Jacobs out of Penn State would be absolutely fantastic for the Titans. Some other guys who I want to mention here, Jalen Ford out of Texas, good size, plays with great motor, maybe doesn't have great speed or coverage ability, but 6'2", 240 pounds with that kind of motor and length could be a possibility. Darius Musa, UCLA, 5'11", 225. He's already 23 years old. Or Muaseo, I guess, is the correct way to say it. But he's a thick-built guy with good punch, good recognition, and great experience, a ton of experience and snaps there at UCLA, but doesn't have great speed, doesn't have great length or coverage instincts. I'm just not taking a guy who doesn't have great speed and athleticism at linebacker this late. I'm just not doing it, period. I want my linebackers to be athletes. All right. If I'm going to take them in the draft, they better be a good athlete. If they're undrafted, sure, I'll take a chance on somebody with great instincts and recognition skills, and plays tough and physical and all that, like Jack Gibbons. I'll take a chance on a Jack Gibbons when he's undrafted, but I'm not drafting Jack Gibbons. No athleticism. Why would I do that? So, anyways, moving right along, got to mention Tommy Eichenberg. Go Buckeyes, Ohio State. But again, no athleticism, no length. I'm out on that. The final guy I want to mention here, though, the final guy is Maris Liufau. Notre Dame, 6'2", 234, 23.2 years old. Great length, great frame. He can look, he's just so big. He's huge. Strong hands. Plays with great motor. Really good in zone coverage as well. He's also had some experience as an edge rusher. The way his hands work and the way he's able to use his hands, you can tell that he's had some edge rusher experience. And again, for a Titans defense that wants to be super multiple and super versatile up front, I think he could be a fit. Now, doesn't play with great anticipation. He doesn't have great range sideline to sideline. Needs to improve his instincts. But his zone coverage ability, his ability to rush the passer and use his hands, how fast and hard that he plays with that length and that frame, I think if you're getting him in the 7th round, 6th round, something like that, it would absolutely be worth it. But we got to transition and talk about the defensive line. I've talked about the edge rushers. Now I want to talk about the guys from 5 technique all the way down to nose tackle. Can't wait to dive into that with you guys. Before I do, though, do want to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by Yahoo Finance. Let's get straight to the point. You want to grow your portfolio to deal with the rising costs of inflation, to pay off your debt or your mortgage, pretty much anything standing in the way of you and financial freedom, right? With Yahoo Finance, you get access to the news, data, and tools that you need in order to reach that financial freedom. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or you're looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. They are the #1 finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analysis ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. You can pull all of your investment accounts into Yahoo Finance so you can track them all at the same time. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. Titans fans, let's cap off today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast, scouting linebackers and defensive line. We've talked about the linebackers so far, a very important position for the Titans to hit at some point late in the draft. But I also think the Titans are going to look to shore up the defensive line at some point during the draft as well. I'm going to get into the names that fit best for the Titans and where they could play within the defense. Again, thank you guys for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day. Check out my slot receiver film breakdown on the Tic Tac Titans film channel. It's out right now. I went over Malik Neighbors, Ladd McConkey, Ricky Pearsall, guys who I think could fit in the slot for the Titans in the first 2 rounds. But moving into the defensive line, I want to break this up. First, I want to talk about defensive linemen who play like defensive tackle and defensive end. Think about 3 techniques. So if you guys don't know about alignment on the defensive line, when defensive ends are super wide outside the offensive tackles, that's a 9 technique. On the tackles outside shoulder, 7 technique. On the tackles inside shoulder, usually that's considered 5 technique. head up over the guard or right in between the tackle and the guard, like Jeffrey Simmons, is a 3 technique. And then you'll have 1 technique or 0 technique, which are either head up over the center or shaded on one of the center shoulders. Think about a Teair Tart. So Danico Autry was a 5 technique. Jeffrey Simmons was a 3 technique. And Teair Tart was a 0 technique nose tackle. So usually that's considered D end, D tackle, and nose tackle. So when I start using those terms, if you're not super familiar with that terminology, hopefully that clears it up for you. Okay. But number 1, I want to talk about Rook from Clemson. 6'4", 294 pounds, 22 and a half years old. He can play kind of in between. He's a tweener at the end of the day. He's not necessarily big enough to be a 3 technique defensive tackle, but he's not necessarily athletic enough to play on the edge. So he's going to kind of be like your 5 technique, your Danico Autry, who can play some defensive end, but is probably going to kick inside during pass rush situations. He's got incredible length, 34-inch arms, okay? Can shed blocks. Obviously, he's got good length. He keeps the offensive lineman off his body. He's a good gap shooter, and I think that'll be important in the Tennessee Titans' new defense. I think they want guys who could shoot gaps. He's got great potential. If you could put some more weight on him, he's going to be a deadly interior rusher. If you can get some extra strength, he might be able to hold up on the edge. But again, he is a tweener. And when you're kind of in between positions, some teams don't think they have a role for you. He does need to improve his hand technique. He does need to add strength as well. But I think in the 3rd round, there's like 3 rows there at the end of the name. A row is I think how it actually goes. But I think he can make a lot of sense. I do want to stop real quick because I should have mentioned this at first. There are names I'm not talking about. The top names on the defensive line: Byron Murphy out of Texas, Johnny Newton out of Illinois, Chris Jenkins out of Michigan, Michael Hall out of Ohio State. Those guys are going to go in the first 2 rounds. And I'm sorry, but the Titans cannot take interior defensive line in the first 2 rounds because a lot of those guys are 3 techniques. Byron Murphy played nose, but I think he's going to be more of a 3 at the NFL level. Johnny Newton is a 3. Chris Jenkins is a 3. Michael Hall is a 3. The Titans have a $100 million 3 technique in Jeffrey Simmons. So I'm not drafting someone who plays the same position as him in the first 2-3 rounds. I'm not. It doesn't make any sense. So that's why I jumped straight to Ahororo, because he could be there in the 3rd round if the Titans trade back. 4th round. Mason Smith from LSU, 6'5", 306 pounds, only 21 and a half years old. He could play anywhere on the defensive line. 35-inch arms, super long, great size. He's able to shed blocks. He's so quick for a guy that big. He's a strong tackler. Look, he needs to work on his awareness, knowing where the running back is going, having good vision in the backfield. He needs to work on not being so upright, keeping his pad level low, and he's had some injury issues. But a guy who can move up and down the line, I think my guy James Foster from No Flags Film compared him to Muhammad Wilkerson, former defensive lineman from, a couple of years ago, 10 years ago, however long it's been. I'm old. But man, Mason Smith healthy could be a beast anywhere up and down the defensive line. Brandon Dorless from Oregon, 6'3", 283. Great movement skills, great awareness, good secondary moves, even if his first move gets beat, but doesn't play with great balance. He's not going to be an edge setter on the defense to be a defensive end, so he's more of an interior guy, but he doesn't play with great power or take on double teams very well, so it makes me worry. Dwayne Carter, another guy, 6'2", 302 pounds. He's probably going to be a 3 technique defensive tackle. Will he be able to put on the weight to be a nose tackle? Can he take on the double team like a nose tackle has to? I wonder. Now, Dwayne Carter, and shout out Lil Wayne, of course, but Dwayne Carter from Duke, explosive, good change of direction, good bull rush. He's got great pass rush moves. He's a durable guy who's played every game for 3 years. He's got excellent football character, a leader in the locker room, forced 8 forced fumbles, ball production, like it's all there. But again, I just question whether he can be a nose tackle to pair with Jeffrey Simmons with his inability to take on double teams. You're not drafting someone who plays the same spot as Jeffrey Simmons in the defense. It's a waste, okay? So the last guy I want to mention on the defensive line for guys who aren't nose tackles, for DTs, DNs, guys like that, is Justin Egboigbe. I think is the correct way to pronounce some of these names, man. I'm trying my best. But Alabama guy, 6'4", 297 pounds, 23 years old. He played everything at Alabama. He played a 2-eye inside shade and a 2 technique. He kicked out the 3. He played some 4. He played some 5. Like, he was all over the line of scrimmage for Alabama. Great length with his arms. He's got great power as well. Smart hands. He was coached up well at Alabama and good processing speed. He's able to quickly diagnose what's going on in the backfield. But at the end of the day, he's not big enough to play nose tackle, and he doesn't have the athleticism that you would want from guys on the outside, further away from nose tackle. So he's kind of in between, and that's a dangerous game. Now, the guys that I really love are the nose tackles, because I think the Titans need a nose tackle. And you can get one in undrafted free agency, in my opinion. But in the 7th round, in the 6th round, if the Titans want to take one of these nose tackles, I'm not going to freak out about that. I'm not going to be upset about it, especially if they take somebody I really like Fabian Lovett. Florida State nose tackle, 6'3", 314 pounds. He is 24 and a half years old. Again, an incredibly old draft class. But he can come in right away. You don't need big potential from your nose tackle. Come in right away, take on the double teams, stack the offensive linemen, and stop the run. That's what I want. If you could rush the passer, cool. It's like Tierre Tart. Tart was never a super great pass rusher. He got, a couple sacks here and there, but that's not what he's in the game for, okay? Fabian Lovett has great length, strong hands, takes on double teams like a monster. He may not give you pass rush upside. He's an older prospect. He never played more than 500 snaps in a season, but I don't need him to. He's a 2-down nose tackle that needs to stuff the run and get his knee on the dang ground and stop the double team. All right, and that's what Fabian Lovett's going to do. I mentioned T'Vondre Sweat. Everybody loves Sweat. I'm so glad that people have opened their eyes and seen that he's not someone you take in the first top 100 picks. Give me a break. But 6'4", 360 to some people say he played at 390 pounds at Texas at times. He's 22 years old, close to 23. Look, he's huge. He's nimble for being that huge. He's a good pass rusher. He's a good processor. He quickly figures out what teams are doing. But at the end of the day, he's not super explosive. He doesn't play with a ton of power for a guy that size. He depends on his size instead of correct technique. And let's just talk about the elephant in the room. He is overweight. His weight is a problem. And if you think that that's rude or I'm unprofessional for mentioning that, every scouting report you read is going to talk about him keeping his weight down. Trent Brown, the offensive tackle all the Titans fans wanted and I was interested in, he had a clause in his contract about keeping his weight down when he was with the Patriots. So this is something that NFL teams care about, all right? It's not rude or mean or, I'm not body shaming him. The guy plays overweight. And when you're overweight like that, you're not going to be able to play enough snaps to make a pick worth it. The guy can't play more than 60 snaps in a game or he's going to be exhausted because he's overweight. He's got to get his weight down. He's got to be more diligent. And he just got a DUI. 3 weeks before the draft, you're going to get a DUI before your life is about to change forever. He was going to be a top 50 pick from some dumb team, and then he gets a DUI. He was described as a party animal, as a class clown. He's just an immature guy who makes mistakes off the field and will embarrass your franchise. For a 2-down player with limited pass rush upside long-term, not a chance. Not a chance. Am I taking T'Vondre Sweat? Christian Boyd, though, Northern Illinois or Northern Iowa, 6'2", 325, 24 years old, a guy like Fabian Lovett, limited pass rush upside, but he's going to be a 2-down nose tackle that can stop the run, who's old enough and in his man body and big enough to come in right away and fill that position. You have Sebastian Joseph Day. You have Jeffrey Simmons. You add a guy like Fabian Lovett or Christian Boyd. You add one of the edge rushers we talked about yesterday, go with Arden Key and Harold Landry, and you have a pretty good defensive line again. So that's what I'm looking at. Another guy like that's Jordan Jefferson, but I just don't know if Jordan Jefferson from LSU is going to be a guy who can really play nose tackle. He might be more of a 3-technique backup guy. But McKinley Jackson from Texas A&M, 6'1", 326, 22 years old, so the youngest of these pure nose tackles that we're talking about. Great frame, great length, quick hands, quick first step. Another guy who probably isn't going to play a ton of snaps, but he's a 2-down nose tack and run stuffer. So why do I care about that? Also want to mention, I didn't mention Brandon Fisk, Leonard Taylor. Again, I don't think those guys fit because they're going to do what Jeffrey Simmons does. And I'm not taking Braden Fisk in the top 50 picks when he plays the same position as a guy who's getting paid $100 million. Just don't understand that concept. So give me a nose tackle, give me a defensive end, and let's fix the middle of this defense along with maybe a linebacker late in the draft as well. But another extended draft preview episode. Check out the Locked On NFL mock draft, Locked On Sports Today, 24/7 on YouTube, on Amazon Fire TV. That's going to do it for me today, folks. Again, tomorrow, we're wrapping up our draft preview with the defensive backfield, talking cornerbacks and safeties. Can't wait to dive into it, but that is going to do it for me today, folks. As always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this was Locked On Titans.